My husband had the audacity to demand that I quit my $300,000 job and be a stay-at-home wife. 3 weeks later, he told his friends, "She's too dumb for the corporate world anyway." I overheard it on a Zoom call and replied, "Funny, that's what my CEO said about you." My name's Maureen Langley. I'm 42 now, but this all started when I was 40. At the time, I was living in Lexington, Massachusetts, working in corporate strategy at one of the largest healthcare companies in the US. If you're in the industry, you probably know the name. I won't say it here because legal stuff, but let's just say we were responsible for a lot of the major infrastructure behind Medicare compliance and hospital partnerships. My title was Senior Director of Strategic Planning. I had a team of nearly 40, and I worked directly under the company's Chief Operating Officer. My salary was $297,000 a year, not including bonuses. My job was intense: boardroom meetings, 80-hour work weeks during peak quarters, red-eye flights to conferences in Chicago or San Diego, but I thrived on it. I met Caleb Renner at a mutual friend's wedding in Burlington. He was 39, tall, quick-witted, and owned a couple of luxury car dealerships across Massachusetts and Connecticut. His smile came easy, and his confidence could fill a room. At first, I was drawn to it. He seemed like someone who knew what he wanted. Someone who wouldn't be intimidated by a successful woman. We dated for a year, got married in a beautiful fall ceremony at a vineyard in Rhode Island, and moved into a gorgeous 2-story colonial just west of downtown Boston. For a while, everything was good. But as my career continued to climb, something in Caleb started to shift. Subtle at first. Sarcastic comments when I'd talk about promotions. Passive-aggressive jokes when I came home late. He hated when I traveled. He'd complain that I put work before him. That I acted like I was better than him. Still, I pushed forward. I thought we were just going through a rough patch. I blamed the long hours. Maybe he felt lonely. Maybe I wasn't being present enough. Then came the pandemic. Working from home sounded like a dream at first, but the reality? It gave him more access to my time and more ammunition. Suddenly, every Zoom call was a problem. Every "do not disturb" sign on my office door was seen as me shutting him out. He'd walk in during meetings. Turn off the Wi-Fi when I was in the middle of a presentation. Even unplugged my monitor once when I didn't hear him calling for lunch. And when I confronted him? He'd smirk and say, "You're too uptight. It's just work. Relax." Eventually, it all boiled over during a fight about nothing: the color of the backsplash tiles we were picking out for the kitchen remodel. He slammed the sample book shut and said, "You know what? Maybe you should just quit." I laughed. "You're joking." "I'm not," he said. "You work too much. This isn't a partnership, it's a performance. You don't even enjoy it anymore. Be a wife for once." The way he said wife made my skin crawl. I told him I'd think about it, even though I already knew how ridiculous it sounded. I mean, who asks their spouse to walk away from a nearly $300,000 job in this economy? Still, the pressure mounted. He started waking me up in the middle of the night to argue. Accused me of cheating with my COO because we emailed late. He'd hide my car keys on days he knew I had to go into the office. The emotional manipulation was nonstop. I was tired. Mentally drained. And I started believing maybe, just maybe, I was burned out. Maybe I did need a break. So I requested a 90-day sabbatical. It was meant for family medical leave or personal hardship. I didn't lie, I just said I needed time. My CEO, Maya Delacroix, respected me. She didn't ask many questions. Just said, "We'll be here when you're ready." I cried when I hit submit on the HR portal. The first week was eerily quiet. No early morning alarms. No back-to-back Zooms. I tried to sleep, to breathe, to feel normal. But I couldn't. Something felt off. Caleb, on the other hand, was glowing. Like he'd finally won some invisible war I didn't know we were fighting. By week 3, I was cooking, cleaning, and folding towels while he took more calls from the boys. He'd talk loudly on speaker, walking through the house like he owned it. That Thursday afternoon, I was reading in the sunroom when I heard my name. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then I heard it again, followed by laughter. Yeah, she quit. Finally. I told her it was time. Honestly, I don't think she was ever really cut out for that world. Too dumb for corporate. My blood ran cold. The room felt like it was spinning. My first instinct was denial. He didn't mean that. Maybe it came out wrong. But then I heard it again. Clearer this time. She got lucky. DEI hire, timing, whatever. She's smart, but not leadership smart. I stood up. My hands were shaking. I walked toward his home office, opened the door silently, and stood in the doorway. His screen was filled with 5 or 6 other dealership managers. One of them noticed me first, his eyes going wide. Caleb didn't see me yet. So I stepped into view. He turned, startled. I said, calmly and clearly, "Funny, that's exactly what my CEO said about you." You could hear a pin drop. One guy on the call actually choked on his drink. I didn't wait for Caleb's reaction. I turned around and walked straight out of the room. He didn't come after me right away. I think he was too stunned. Instead, he stayed in that room with the door shut, probably trying to do damage control with his little dealership cronies, while I sat back down in the sunroom and stared out at the maple tree in our backyard. The same one we'd picked out together 2 summers ago when we were redoing the landscaping. I remembered how he'd said, "Let's plant something that lasts. Something that'll grow with us." Ironic. I was still staring out the window when I finally heard the office door open, his footsteps hesitating just before reaching the hallway. "Maureen?" His voice was soft. Like he was calling for a dog that had gotten loose. I didn't respond. He came into the sunroom, hands in his pockets like a teenager caught sneaking out. That came out wrong. I raised my eyebrows. Which part? The too dumb or the part where you called my career a diversity hire? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. It was just guy talk. You know how we are. I didn't mean it. You know I don't think that about you. I know exactly what you think about me, I said, finally looking at him. You think if you can't be the most successful person in the room, you'll tear down whoever is. Maureen, save it. And that was the last conversation we had that day. That night, I locked the guest bedroom door and sat with my laptop, rereading my last few emails with Maya. Her final message had said, "Take the time you need. We'll keep the light on for you." I wrote her back at 2:41 a.m. subject, reconsidering sabbatical body, "Hi Maya, if the position's still available, I'd like to come back earlier than expected. I understand if we need to discuss the transition. Please let me know when you're available." She responded at 6:12 a.m. "I never processed your paperwork. Something told me you weren't done here. Let's meet Monday." I cried reading that email. Not because I was emotional. Because someone finally believed in me more than the man who was supposed to. The next 48 hours were a blur. I packed a bag. Just a small one, enough for a week or 2. Booked a short-term rental in Cambridge, about 20 minutes away. Close to work, far from Caleb. He didn't notice at first. Or pretended not to. When I wheeled the suitcase down the stairs, he stood there like a statue, mouth slightly open. "You're leaving?" "I already left," I said. "You just didn't notice." He followed me to the car, barefoot, in sweatpants. A man who suddenly realized the thing he thought he owned was slipping through his fingers. "You're overreacting. You convinced me to quit my job. You sabotaged my work. Then you mocked me to your friends like I was your personal punchline." He looked panicked. "I'll fix it." "You can't fix this," I said, slamming the car door shut. "Because you meant every word." He stood in the driveway as I backed out. I didn't look back. Monday came and I was in my office by 8 a.m. The second I stepped back into the building, something clicked inside me. Not just a return to work, but a return to myself. My team welcomed me like I'd never left. Maya stopped by with coffee and said, "It's good to have you home." I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. The next few weeks were focused and healing. I threw myself into a new strategic project on hospital equity initiatives. Work had always been more than a job for me, it was where I felt competent, respected, seen. Meanwhile, Caleb kept texting, calling. He'd switch between guilt-tripping me, "You left me like I was nothing," and "Love being, let's start fresh. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything." I didn't respond. But the final straw wasn't even something he said to me. It was something he sent. An envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. 2 pages. The first page was an apology. Long-winded and flowery. How he missed me. How he didn't know why he acted the way he did. How he'd been jealous, yes, but only because he admired me. But the second page? It was a list. My conditions for us getting back together. I wish I were joking. Among them, that I wouldn't return to working more than 40 hours a week, that I would agree to a weekly date night where phones were banned, that I attend couples counseling, with a therapist he chose, and most insultingly, that we discuss whether staying home is still a valid long-term option. It was like he thought I'd forgotten who I was. Or worse, like he thought I wanted to forget. I folded the letter back up, walked to the shredder in my office, and watched it disappear strip by strip. Then I opened a new browser tab and searched, "Top-rated divorce attorneys Boston." I made 3 consultations that day. Only one of them ended up mattering. Her name was Judith Salinger, and from the second she shook my hand, I knew I was in the right place. She read through my emails, the recordings I had of Caleb disrupting meetings, the forwarded clip of that Zoom call one of his own managers sent me, anonymously, I might add, with a message that said, "This was messed up. You didn't deserve it." Judith smiled and said, "You've got more than enough to protect yourself. You think I'll win?" She didn't hesitate. "You already have." That night, I sat on the small balcony of my Cambridge rental with a glass of red wine, the cool spring air brushing against my skin, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt light. Not happy yet. But not afraid anymore. Just free. The first formal hearing came faster than I expected. Caleb tried to play the victim. Of course he did. He showed up in a navy suit that looked slightly too expensive for the circumstances, flanked by an attorney who looked like she was used to spinning gold out of garbage. He had trimmed his beard down, styled his hair differently, and even brought along a portfolio of his dealership's latest quarterly growth, like that had anything to do with our marriage collapsing. He wanted spousal support. Let me repeat that. He wanted me to pay him, because I had convinced him to scale back on expanding his business while I pursued a high-pressure executive lifestyle. He claimed emotional distress. Said the power imbalance in our marriage had always left him feeling emasculated, and that my overbearing presence made it impossible for him to grow his business the way he originally planned. My lawyer Judith leaned toward me during the hearing and whispered, "He's seriously trying to say you worked too hard and that's why he failed?" I didn't smile. I was too tired. But in that moment, I felt something better than satisfaction, I felt certainty. Judith dismantled his claims like a surgeon, clean, precise, and lethal. She presented emails, screenshots, calendar records, even a digital paper trail that showed Caleb's repeated efforts to sabotage my work-from-home days. Times he canceled my Zoom meetings. Times he accidentally deleted shared calendar entries. A particularly nasty email he sent to my personal inbox after a late-night board presentation that read, "You're not impressing anyone, Maureen. They're just too scared to tell you that you're replaceable." We submitted everything. And then, the crown jewel. The Zoom recording. I didn't even need to introduce it with commentary. Just pressed play. There he was, laughing. Confident. Casual. Honestly, she was never cut out for that world anyway. Too dumb for corporate. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the HVAC hum. Even his own attorney paused, her pen frozen midair. When the clip ended, Caleb's jaw twitched. Just slightly. He didn't look at me once. The judge asked if there was anything I wanted to add. I stood, straightened my blazer, and said, I stepped away from a high-ranking role for someone who believed the only way to match my success was to destroy it. I didn't quit because I wanted to. I quit because I was exhausted by the person who claimed to love me working overtime to sabotage me. And then mocking me for what he broke. Caleb cleared his throat like he might object. He didn't. Afterward, the court recommended a full asset audit, Caleb's dealerships included. Turns out, he hadn't been as financially stable as he liked to present. One of his Connecticut branches was under review for tax discrepancies, and another had been operating at a loss for over a year. He'd borrowed against the home in Lexington, my home, bought with a down payment made mostly from my bonuses, and never told me. Judith looked over the financials and said, he's upside down and scrambling. He thought you'd foot the bill to save face. Instead, I filed to keep the house. And I got it. I didn't even want it at first. Too many memories. But the idea of him having his cigar nights in that sunroom while telling new stories about how he let his wife go because she couldn't keep up made my stomach turn. So I took it back. Everything that was mine. The process stretched out over several months, but I stayed focused. I doubled down on work, not just out of passion, but out of necessity. When your life cracks open like that, when the man you thought was your safe space turns out to be the one throwing grenades, you rebuild by anchoring yourself in what can't be taken. My work ethic? Untouchable. My mind? Unshaken. My worth? Never again up for debate. At the office, I was back in full form. Maya kept me close, looping me into executive meetings even outside my usual scope. She asked me one day, over coffee, if I was interested in a more senior position long term. Your name comes up in every strategy session, Maureen. People notice when you're not in the room. That same week, Caleb tried again. He sent a text. If you're still reading these, I want you to know I'm sorry. The way things ended. I wish I could go back. We were good once, right? I stared at the screen for a moment, thumb hovering. Then I blocked the number. There was nothing else to say. I moved back into the Lexington house 2 weeks after the decree went through. It was quiet, but not haunting. I repainted the bedroom. Got rid of his leather recliner, the one he always called the king's chair. Replaced it with a reading nook. Small velvet armchair, side table, antique lamp. Soft. Peaceful. I even replaced the damn backsplash in the kitchen. Chose a warm gray subway tile with a copper trim that picked up the sunlight just right in the morning. The same week it was finished, I hosted a dinner party for my team. Maya came. So did Terrence, my second-in-command, and a few people from the operations team. Everyone laughed when I said, it's BYOB unless you bring tequila, then it's leave the bottle and we're best friends forever. At one point, someone asked, Maureen, how did you get your house to feel this calm? I laughed without thinking. Well, the loudest part of it moved out a few months ago. Everyone laughed. But I wasn't joking. It's wild how fast people show you who they are when they realize you no longer need them to survive. Caleb had built an entire identity around being the big fish. The alpha. But the second he realized he couldn't control me, he unraveled. And the truth is, I always knew. I knew the moment he asked me to give it all up. Not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being eclipsed. Fear of being the man who married a woman he could no longer impress. But what he didn't understand is that I never needed him to be impressive. I needed him to be kind. To be decent. To be proud of me, not threatened. And when he couldn't be those things, I became them for myself. The months that followed were the calmest I'd ever experienced. It was the little things that hit me the hardest. Not waking up to tension in the air. Not second-guessing my every move. Not having to shrink myself for the sake of someone else's comfort. I started running again. A slow, steady 5K route through Minuteman National Park on weekends. I stopped drinking wine to fall asleep. I started drinking it to celebrate small wins instead, like crushing a board presentation or helping one of my analysts get their first promotion. I even got a dog. A rescue named Bella, a timid little greyhound who had the same quiet, wounded energy I'd had when I first left Caleb. We healed together. And as for Caleb? Oh, he didn't go down quietly. After the court case, things unraveled fast for him. One of his dealership managers, ironically, the same guy who accidentally recorded the Zoom call, ended up leaving the company. Word was that he'd filed an internal complaint for toxic management practices and attached the clip of Caleb mocking me as part of a larger pattern. That set off a domino effect. A few more employees resigned. The Connecticut location folded 6 months later. By the time the state tax investigation was done, Caleb had to sell off the Andover branch just to stay afloat. I never made a call. Never sent an email. Never pulled a string. The world just handled him. But my favorite part? Oh, that came later. About a year after the divorce, I was invited to speak at a leadership summit hosted in downtown Boston, one of those big corporate affairs with panels and breakout rooms and a hotel ballroom full of people in navy blazers, and I just had espresso smiles. My topic? Women in strategy, leading without permission. It was a packed session. I walked on stage in a deep plum suit, notes in hand, and halfway through my keynote, I looked up, and there he was. Caleb. In the back row, near the exit. At first I wasn't sure. He looked smaller. Not physically. But something about him seemed dimmed. His shoulders weren't squared the way they used to be. His hairline had thinned a bit, his face slightly gaunt, his expression flat. He wasn't a guest. I realized quickly that he was there tagging along with another dealership rep who had likely brought him as a plus one. It wasn't his world anymore. It was mine. He didn't expect to see me. That much was clear. When I met his eyes, he froze. I paused, just long enough for him to realize I'd clocked him, then smiled, and kept going. I wrapped my speech with a standing ovation. Afterward, people came up for pictures, questions, handshakes. I gave a few polite hugs, took a selfie with a younger analyst who told me, "I want to be you when I grow up," and stepped into the hotel lobby to grab a water before the next session. That's when he approached me. "Maureen," he said. His voice low, cautious. Like he wasn't sure which version of me he'd get. I turned to face him. "Caleb." He looked around, then back at me. I saw your talk. You were amazing." I waited. He fumbled. "I just wanted to say. I was wrong. About a lot of things. About you. About everything." I nodded. "Yeah. You were." He hesitated. "I'd been meaning to reach out. To apologize. But I figured after everything, I didn't have the right." "You don't," I said, not harshly. Just honestly. There was silence. Thick, awkward. Then I asked, "Are you still working in the auto space?" He gave a weak shrug. "Trying to. It's been rough." He waited for me to say something. A lifeline. A pity response. An olive branch. Instead, I gave him the kindest thing I had left, closure. "Well," I said, sipping my water, "I hope you figure things out." And I turned to leave. No dramatic goodbye. No final barb. Just a clean, calm exit. I walked away from the man who tried to break me, and didn't. 6 months later, I was promoted again. Executive Vice President, Strategy and Development. I bought myself a new car to celebrate. Not from one of Caleb's lots, of course. From a competitor. A little cherry red Lexus with leather seats and an absurdly over-the-top sound system. Bella rides in the back like a queen. Sometimes, on Sundays, I'll sit in my sunroom with a book and a coffee and look out at that old maple tree. The one we planted. It's still growing. Taller now. Stronger. Its roots are deep. Just like mine. And every once in a while, when someone asks how I got where I am, I smile and say, someone once tried to convince me I wasn't built for this world. Turns out, it was him who wasn't.